The search continues for the worst action figure line based on a movie. And this week, we're gonna look at Dick. Welcome back to the Junk Room, everybody. It's me, the Junkman, coming back at you with a whole new video. Today, we continue our weekly search for the worst action figure line based on a film. Again, we're only looking at action figures that's based on a good film, or at least, it doesn't have to be great, but it has to be at least liked by a lot of people. Also, the line has to have more than 3 figures to it. 4 or more is what I'm looking at. Now, before we start the search, as always, you want to support this channel, head over to Patreon. You know all that up there and down there, and buy some cool t-shirts like this one, that Junkman.com. You get tired of me plugging this all the time, but I got to. It's keeping the lights on. So, let's continue our search for the worst action figure line based on a film. This time we're going back to 1990 to look at action figures based on the live action movie, Dick Tracy.
It's like he's reading my mind.
In 1989, Batman was the biggest movie of the year, and kids were crazy about it. So Disney wanted their cut at the Batman money. And Warren Beatty had been trying to bring Dick Tracy to the big screen for years. So they teamed up in 1990, and we got the first, and so far only, big screen live action movie of the 1930s comic book strip detective, Dick Tracy. The power of Warren Beatty helped bring in an all-star cast, such as Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, James Caan, Madonna, and more. With the release of the movie, Disney reached out to Playmate Toys, who was riding high with their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figure line.
Warren Beatty is Dick Tracy.
The action figure line for Dick Tracy only lasted one series and made up of 14 action figures. Most of these action figures could easily be found at your local toy store, except for the Blank, who was only sold in Canada and extremely rare. When you can pick up most of these action figures now on eBay for under $50, some even under $10, the figure of the Blank can run you into the thousands. As for the film, it may not have been a flop on paper, but it wasn't the blockbuster Disney hoped for. So Disney halted any sequel plans, and Warren Beatty, who owned the rights, hoped to do a sequel on his own, but legal issues kept that from happening for years. Now, before we look at this action figure line and tell you if it's the worst action figure line based on a film, let's look at how we rank these figures. We have 5 categories, and here's a clip from my video from 2 weeks ago explaining how the ratings work. First up, we're going to look at the look of the action figure. Does the action figure look like what we see in the movie? Do they dress the same? Does it look like the actors that the film's based on? Are these figures worth playing with as a kid? Would kids enjoy playing with something like this, even if maybe they don't look like what they do in the movie? Did the toy company time it right? Did they release the action figures way too early to where the time the movie came out no one cared? Or did they release the action figures way too late where kids just moved on and didn't care either way? To sell kids on action figures, you gotta catch their eye, and packaging does that. Look at the vintage Star Wars action figure cards. Your eyes are gonna connect with the package, and it's gonna cause kids to pick up the action figure, look at it, and decide if they want it. Do these figures hold up? Sure, we can all buy an action figure and stand it up somewhere, and it would last for a couple of years. But does it stand up to kids throwing them off dressers and against the wall? Now you know how the ratings work. Let's look at number 1, the look of the figure. The figures were 5 inches tall and odd, at least compared to other action figures of the time. They looked thicker, bulkier. Due to this odd look, they didn't look much like the actors from the film, but wasn't really far off either. They looked more like a smaller down, squished action figure of what you saw in the movie. Why Playmates went with this different look is unknown. The arms and legs do move, but only at the shoulders and hip. If you were a fan of the movie and wanted something that made you feel like you were playing with what you saw on the screen, this wasn't it. The look is not bad, it's just so different from what most action figures look like, it comes off as odd. The details here are actually really done well. The only thing that really hurts the look of these action figures is the odd 5-inch look. So let's rank the look of these figures based on a 5-star rating. And believe it or not, the look of these action figures receive a 4. Now that we've looked at the look, let's look at the play value. Were they fun for kids to play with? The figures here, as I said, was bulky. That could have easily hurt the play, as kids were used to smaller figures at the time, but honestly, it really doesn't hurt the play. The style of the figures does make it hard for them to sit down or interact with playsets. However, the line didn't have any playsets, only 2 cards for the figures to ride in. Each figure came with weapons and accessories. Most figures came with a belt that really didn't stay on well when playing with the figure. It would have been a lot better if the belt was built into the figure, but the guns and other accessories are different with each figure, so it makes each figure unique when playing. Also, with 14 figures in the line, there are plenty of characters to play with. However, it would have been nice if there wasn't so many bad guys. There were 2 cards in the line that added a lot of fun and looked really well done. So let's rank the play value of these figures. And believe it or not, I'm going to have to give this a 4 out of 5 stars. Now that we looked at the play value of these figures, it's time to move on. And we're going to look at marketing. This here is where we look at, did the company release it at the right time? Did they release it too late where kids already forgotten about the movie? Or did they release it way too early by the time the movie came out? Kids were kind of sick of seeing the toys. The figures were released by Playmates in 1990, a few months before the film's release. As we've talked about before, a good, successful toy line needs to come out before the release of a film, but not too early. Here, the figures only hit a few months before release, making an ideal release time. I can't really find anything bad to talk about the release date here. So, out of the 5-star rating, we're going to give the marketing 5 stars. Now that we got the marketing out of the way, let's look at what really grabs kids at a toy store, the packaging. The front is very colorful and eye-catching. The bubble is placed in the center. As most figures, the bubble was at the bottom of the card. The bubble is clear, no writing to hide the extra accessories inside or the figure. It's always good to show what all you get for your money, especially for a kid. The bad part is there's no photo of the movie character on the card. The villains in the movie are so wacky and unusual, a scene from the film probably would have caught kids' eye and helped them to buy the figure. The back of the card is a little comic book strip and clearly shows each figure in the line that you can get. And probably the best is a cutout information card that looks like a mugshot, telling about the action figure's character and the crimes he's done. The only real major issue is that, looking at the odd figures on the card and the packaging, you wouldn't know this was from a live action movie. You would think it was some toy company making action figures based on the Dick Tracy radio show to cash in on the film. However, the drawing of Dick Tracy on the front of the card does use the likeness of Warren Beatty. Nothing on the card hints that this is a movie at all. It's kind of odd. You think there would be some go see Dick Tracy or Dick Tracy this summer or something to let you know this is from a movie. Being they look so odd when you first see them, they don't look like they're from the movie at all. But the cards are really well done with a lot of information on the back and not seeming too crowded. So let's rank the packaging of these figures. And here we're going to give it a 4 out of 5. I think they did really well with the packaging. Could have been better for sure, but it's not bad. Now, let's look at the quality. Do these figures hold up when kids are playing rough with them and throwing them all around their room? The bulky, odd-looking figures are pretty sturdy, but the biggest issue is with the legs. As with a lot of play over time, they've been known to break or become really loose. This isn't a major issue, but it does happen quite often, more than most action figures of the time. The figures are bulky and can survive being thrown around and tossed around in a room and hard play. I really couldn't find much to say bad about these action figures in the quality, except for the legs becoming really loose or even broken. So let's rank the quality of these action figures. Out of 5 stars, give it a 4. Now that we looked at all 5 details of the ranking, let's give the overall ranking. Last week we looked at Dragonheart. It's always on people's list of the worst action figure movie line ever, and I was shocked that it got such a high score. And we're going to do it again with Dick Tracy. This action figure line comes up on a list of worst action figures ever made a lot, but now that I've taken a closer look at these action figures, I can't really say it's one of the worst action figure movie lines ever. I think a lot of people don't like a movie, therefore they say the action figure line's bad. But if you look at the action figure and don't look at the movie, these are really good action figures. The downside with these action figures is they look odd. And I think that also throws a lot of people off when they saw them at toy stores. Especially people fan of the movie where they look a little like the characters in the film, but they look almost like a generic action figure line than an action figure line based on the film. I believe maybe Playmates was trying to go with a classic look and not look like other action figures in the toy store at the time. Being that the movie is set place in the 30s, maybe they was hoping to make action figures look like something kids would have had in the 1930s if they had action figures back then. But you can tell Playmates took care and love with this action figure line, from its accessories to its packaging to the look of the figure. So overall, let's look at the rating for this action figure line. Believe it or not, out of 5 stars, I'm going to have to give the Dick Tracy action figure line a 4. I've never seen the movie Dick Tracy, and I never really cared about these action figures. They look bulky and weird, so I never really liked them. But after doing this review and seeing some of the cool villains and stuff they made for this line, it kind of makes me want to pick up a few, even if I've never seen the movie. And that's how you know you got a good toy line. So it looks like our search for the worst action figure line based on a film doesn't end here. Don't worry, we got 7 more action figure lines to look at until we find the worst action figure line based on a film ever. Who knows, we may have already looked at it, or it could be next week.
That's what I call a close encounter.
Until the search continues next week, thank you for joining. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you know when we upload a new video, leave your comments below what you think about the Dick Tracy line or what action figure line based on a film you don't like, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.